For most people, the traumas of their life are repetitions of dynamics that have occurred throughout the whole dynamic of their childhood and their adolescence. In their childhood, they had one set of reactions. You would have one set of reactions, one set of emotional templates that were set into place, often one of victimhood, one of disempowerment, one of weakness, because one is a child, one is only knee-high to a grasshopper, when all of these big people are perpetrating all of this, what's the spiritual word, bullshit upon you, all right? And you have to understand, so much of your reality, so many of your beliefs are set in place then, right? And then you move up into your adolescence, and your adolescence where you start feeling really inadequate, but you put on the bold face, and you act in a way that puts on a dynamic of a persona that allows you to be comfortable in your interface with the world, but inside you're still just that weak child and that really pissed off adolescent. All right? Because the adolescent piece of self is basically trying to protect the child. Right? Now, the problem is that within the dynamic of growth, there is a piece of self that wishes to keep you from growing. And that piece is the negative ego. Now, we can source the negative ego all the way back to the original separation, when you lost the dynamic of direct cognition, when you lost when you moved into a level of consciousness, when you realized that you were separate, that you were separate from each other, you were separate from nature, you were separate from spirit. Now, this was a very traumatic dynamic when this occurred. And the problem was that you had a collective ego. You had a collective truth when you were back in the garden experience. Right? And we're going all the way back then because that's when that original template was set. All right? And, we can go into great detail about the battle of the sexes and why that all happened and the female and the masculine. But the truth of the matter is that it was just a dynamic of growth. Just as every child needs to separate from the mother and father in order to develop an identity of their own, so too it was necessary for you to separate from each other, to separate from nature, to separate from spirit, in order to move into this dynamic of individuation that you now have moved into. Now, the problem is that just like any pendulum, it can swing too far. And so many of you are now locked into the dynamics of solitude and isolation, and you're feeling like you're here all alone. Well, you're not here all alone. You're still as connected to you as you were. You have just forgotten your connection in the dynamics of the belief that you have to solve it all yourself. You don't have to solve it all yourself. All you have to do is be good enough. Thought, word, and feeling. Some people are really good at thought. Some people are really good at word. And some people are really good with emotions and feelings. Put three people together that each have that sort of talent, you'd be amazed at what you can create. So, that long-winded explanation was intended to get you to understand that the trauma of the separation, as best evidenced by the legend of Adam and Eve and the snake, right? Okay, if you look at that dynamic of then we call it a legend, if you look at the dynamic of that legend, what you find is that Eve, the feminine, the dreaming piece of the dynamic of self, Eve was curious, and Eve wished to be more. Be more. And the masculine at that time was perfectly willing to manifest anything that the feminine wished, because that's just the way the symbiotic nature of the energies worked. It was just a natural way of being. But If you look at the legends of Adam and Eve and the garden, the snake supposedly tempted them to eat from the tree of knowledge. And when they ate from the tree of knowledge, what was the knowledge that they gained? Any of you remember? That they were naked in the sight of God, naked, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, all of a sudden, they realized that they were separate, that they had an identity of their own. And the problem is that the collective consciousness, the collective ego that was in the garden experience now shattered, and you were left with just that little piece of ego, that little piece of self that now had to survive everything all by yourself. In the garden experience, you had a collective relationship with the divine. You have now, each and every one of you, grown enough that you have developed individual relationships with the divine, which was the purpose in the first place of the movement. So, based on that dynamic and understanding that negative ego, that shard, that piece of the collective consciousness that is left, is terrified. She does not wish you to grow. She does not wish you to be more. She does not wish you to be any more successful, any more at peace than you are right now. It's good enough. You've retained a certain, what shall we say, normalcy bias, a certain status quo energy, and, you know, if you're stay where you are, you will be safe. But your heart says something else, doesn't it? Your heart goes out to all of those that are having difficulty. Mm-hmm. Your heart goes out to these people. And so, because you are not sitting in your home, changing the reality through your thoughts, you blame yourself. You think, oh no, I'm doing it so badly, so wrongly. You're creating exactly what you're feeling. Negative ego isn't very smart. It has to use a wounded piece of self. There's a really easy technique. Really easy. And the technique is to simply go within, locate where the hurt is. It doesn't matter what the hurt is, okay? But locate where the hurt is. And imagine that higher self standing behind you, handing you threads of energy that you use to sew up the wound. It's so simple. Okay, now, that's not the end. It's not the end within the dynamic of the exercise. Mm-hmm. Because when you do that, especially if it is powerful, within 1 hour to 24 hours after you are done, your reality is going to offer you the same old, same old. Because it's just like a computer, isn't it? If you take a program and you highlight it and you hit the delete button, what's the first thing the computer asks you?
Are you sure you want to delete it?
Because negative ego is not smart, that really applies to almost any of the dynamics that you are feeling. Locate it in the body. Now, you may get hints of it. You may, but don't dwell on it. You're not interested in... Well, you have to understand what you're doing here. You're speaking directly to your subconscious. Your subconscious does not speak a spoken language. Your subconscious only works through the dynamic of visuals, pictures, emotions, and what else, Adrian?
Feelings, metaphors,
and feelings.
And symbols.
And symbols.
Symbol, that's right.
Emotion, metaphor, and symbols. And so understand that's what you have done here. With the dynamic, you have identified the hurt through the dynamic of feeling the feelings. You have taken the metaphor, which is you have seen the cut. The metaphor is the cut.
Okay.
And the action is the sewing it up.